Hey guys, and welcome to another lesson on the A+ 1201 exam. This time we're looking at exam objective 2.2. We are going to be explaining wireless networking technologies. We're going to be having a look at the three different kind of frequencies. We're going to be having a look at what are channels, and once we find out what they are, the different regulations and how we can go about selecting them, what kind of things we have to take into consideration, and finally we're going to have a look at Bluetooth 802.11 standards. We'll find out what those are and what we need to know about them, NFC technology again, and then finally RFID. For all of these, I'm going to tell you what you need to know. I'm going to tell you what kind of exam questions you might be asked on your exam, and I'm going to give you some practice questions just like usual. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it, guys. I'm going to make sure you can pass this exam, and you're going to smash it. If you stick with me through these videos, you are going to pass that exam. No questions about it. Let's do it. And let's get to our first component, which is frequencies. So when we're looking at wireless technologies, which is what this exam objective is about, right? We essentially have three different frequencies that we can choose from, and we can see here in these notes. So we can use the 2.4 gigahertz frequency, we can use the 5 gigahertz frequency, or we can use the 6 gigahertz frequency. Each one of these frequencies has pros and cons. Some of them are really, really fast, but they can't go very far. Some of them are easily interrupted by things like baby monitors and microwaves. So we need to think about those kinds of things when we're thinking about which one to use. I'm going to tell you what we need to be thinking about when it comes to these and what the pros and cons are of each. So first of all, before we get to the notes, we'll go through a visual representation. Okay. Let's start with 2.4, the 2.4 gigahertz frequency. It's really good at a couple of things. The first thing it's really good at is, let's say this is our frequency, right? It's really good at going a long way, right? If it wants to get all the way over here, it can go all the way over here. It goes really, really far. If you want a frequency that's going to go a long distance, 2.4 is the frequency you're going to want to choose. And additionally, you'll notice that it actually passes straight through this wall, okay? It goes really far and it can go straight through the wall. It's very good at going long distances, very good at passing through objects, okay? That's something to consider. However, let's think of it as the width of the line here represents how much data is able to pass through, the amount and speed of data transmission. It's quite a small line, isn't it? There's not really a lot of data that can fit in that line. So it can go really far, it can pass through walls, but it's not really sending very high speeds of data, at least in comparison to the other frequencies that we could potentially use. Additionally, if it does come across a baby monitor, this is my attempt to draw a baby monitor here, you'll notice it stops in its tracks, right? It can suffer interference from a baby monitor or from a microwave, things to that effect, because these things also operate on the 2.4 gigahertz frequency. So long story short, it goes really far, it can go through walls, great, but it can be interrupted by baby monitors and microwaves because they operate on the same frequency. And additionally, it doesn't necessarily transmit that much data that quickly. Okay, that's the main thing we have to think about for the 2.4 gigahertz frequency. Now let's contrast that with the 5 gigahertz frequency. Immediately, what we might have a look at, what we might notice is, look at the width of this, right? That is transmitting a lot more data. It's going to be able to transmit a lot more data at a much greater speed. All right. Additionally, this is that same baby monitor, right? For the 2.4 gigahertz, it stopped it in its tracks, but for the 5 gigahertz, it smashed right through it, right? It is not susceptible to interference from baby monitors, microwaves, because those things operate on the 2.4 gigahertz frequency, okay? Which is not the 5 gigahertz frequency, so it just smashes straight through it. So it has really fast rate of data transmission. It can transmit a lot of data. It is not susceptible to interference. So you might be thinking, why would we not want to use this, right? Well, there are definitely cases where we don't want to use it, and that's because if we zoom out, we can see, oh, okay, so if we compare 2.4 to 5 gigahertz frequency, we start to notice a couple of things. Yes, it's transmitting more. Yes, it's not susceptible to interference. However, if it hits a wall, it is a lot less effective. This isn't, I guess, really an entirely accurate representation, because truly it can go through walls, but it's not going to be as effective, right? You'll start to lose some as it goes through a wall. So for your exam, I guess what you need to think about really is the thought that 5 gigahertz, much faster rate of data transfer, can transmit much more data at once, is not susceptible to interference. However, it's not as effective at going through walls. Okay, so it's almost kind of the opposite problems of 2.4, right? It's the opposite. So 2.4 can go a long way. It can go straight through walls, but if it hits a baby monitor or a microwave, it can start to experience some disruptions. However, the 5 gigahertz frequency can transmit much more data. It can smash through baby monitors, but it is not as effective at traveling through walls. And additionally, it's also not as good at traveling longer distances as well, right? So the kind of things you're going to have to toss up in your A+ Core 1 exam is essentially going to be what we're talking about here. You'll likely have to choose a frequency based on the distance it can travel, based on the amount of walls, how congested in terms of the buildings and the amount of walls that are in there. Are there any baby monitors or microwaves around, that kind of thing, right? You'll have to take in all of these considerations, likely to recommend a frequency for this person to choose for their business based on what they're telling you. Okay, so if they're saying, look, I have a really large area to span, I don't necessarily need the highest speeds, which one should I choose? It's got a lot of walls, it's a highly industrialized area, and I can't afford a lot of access points to keep boosting the signal, right? In that case, you might want to go for 2.4 because it can go a long way, it can go through walls, and if you can't boost the signal with a consistent layout of access points because you just don't have the money for that, you're not going to be able to make the 5 gigahertz work, simply because the 5 gigahertz, it just can't travel as far. And if you're saying I need to travel really far, then it's not going to work, right? That's the kind of stuff you need to toss up in your exam, okay? We have one more we want to look at, and that is the 6 gigahertz frequency. Now, 6 gigahertz basically takes everything we said about the 5 gigahertz and just amplifies both the good things and the bad things. So it has a much faster rate of data transfer. It can also smash through those baby monitors and microwaves. It's not susceptible, but it also has less range and is also not as effective as going through walls. So basically, what you find is with each iteration, 2.4 over to 5 over to 6, you gain data transfer speed, the rate of data transfer. You become less susceptible to interference. You also start to lose distance and you start to lose the ability to go through walls. So based on the requirements that you're given for your exam, that's going to be the kind of stuff that you have to toss up. Hopefully that made sense, guys. We're going to go through it with the actual notes now as well. So hang in there with me. Let's have a look at 2.4, everything we just said, right? So we just said the 2.4 gigahertz frequency, it has a longer range compared to the 5 gigahertz frequency. Whoops. Let me get this one. It has a longer range compared to the 5 gigahertz frequency and 6 gigahertz, so it can go longer distance. That's what you need to know. If I'm dialing in on this and I'm really saying the same thing a few times, guys, it's because this is one of those technical ones that you really need to know about for your exam. There's some stuff, like I say, it's common sense, you can pass over it. This isn't one of them. You do need to be able to make these judgments. I might get a bit repetitive, but you can put it on 2-point speed down in the corner there. It'll be down here somewhere if you want to. Okay, so more prone to interference, as we said. So it's more prone to interference from baby monitors and microwaves, things like that, things that operate on the 2.4 gigahertz frequency. Now, in terms of channels as well, it has 11 channels that you can operate on, generally speaking. What is a channel? Let's go through that now, right? Let's say you've got your 2.4 gigahertz frequency and you've got, the numbers aren't accurate, right? Just for the sake of representation. Each one of these lines may represent a channel, right? So these are the channels you can choose from. And you can choose how much of these channels you want to use. So in this case, for 2.4, we've got 3 channels in operation, right? This is a channel operating, this is a channel operating, this is a channel operating. Now, the more channels you have, the less of an opportunity there is for them to cross over each other. If they cross over each other, you start to get interference, right? You might start to lose access to the internet. You might start to drop in and out because the channels are clashing with each other. So what that looks like is this, right? You might, if you have the incorrect channel selection, you might start to have, okay, I have a channel here, great, But then this channel is actually intersecting here, and then you'll start to experience dropouts. So what you have to do is you have to choose the channels that do not intersect with each other. So that's what this is referring to when it says channels. Many of the channels overlap in the 2.4 gigahertz frequency. In fact, there's really only 3 channels you can use in order to guarantee you're not going to overlap, or increase the chances that you're not going to overlap, shall I say. So those channels are 1, 6, and 11. If you're ever choosing channels on a 2.4 gigahertz frequency, 1, 6, and 11 are the only 3 that can operate at the same time without intersecting and you experiencing some dropouts, okay, like we talked about here. All right, so that's important to know. 2.4 gigahertz frequency has the least amount of channels. Speed, we talked about the speeds, right? So you can get speeds of up to 600 megabits per second, but realistically, that's like ideal. Realistically, 30 to 150 megabits per second, okay? So the lower end on the speed compartment, it is very widely compatible. So pretty much every device supports 2.4 gigahertz. So that is something to take into consideration as well. Overall, we talked about the pros and the cons. It has a longer range and it can better penetrate through obstacles and walls, and it is compatible with most devices. The cons, it's more prone to interference, and it does have lower data rates, and it has the potential for congestion on overlapping channels because it only has those 3. Okay, so that's what you need to know about that one. If we move down to the 5 gigahertz frequency, we talked about how the range is shorter in comparison to 2.4. So for the 5 gigahertz frequency, it does have a shorter range compared to 2.4. We looked at that already with the visuals, but it's still effective for most home and office environments, right? Unless you really have something spanning a large distance, like a big warehouse or a big long office. If you've just got like a decently sized office, you'll probably be all right for the most part, particularly if there's not like a lot of walls in there. So it will still be suitable for that kind of environment. It's less prone to interference, as we said. We did talk about how it is not operating on the same 2.4 gigahertz frequency as baby monitors and microwave, things to that effect. So it's less likely to, you're less likely to experience dropouts, right? That's something really important to know. And you also, here's another key thing we haven't talked about yet, you have more channels available. So remember that problem that we talked about, how you get those overlapping channels with the 5 gigahertz frequency, you can actually have more non-overlapping channels, okay? So if you need to have a lot of people operating on that same network and you're going to have to use multiple different channels to avoid that overlap, then you may want to think about the 5 gigahertz over the 2.4 gigahertz, particularly if it's not a really long distance, because you have more channels to choose from. All right, you can avoid congestion when compared to the 2.4 gigahertz frequency a bit better. So again, what that would look like is, last one we had 3, this one you can have way more. All right, this you can have even more than this. You could basically have a whole bunch of different channels in use, and you can also dictate the width of these channels. Okay, so you could choose to just have a channel, like if you wanted, for example, you could set it, say like 20. You could have a channel width of 20, right? You could have a bunch of channels here like this. Or if you wanted, you could have a 2 channels this big, right? So that would have a higher rate of data transfer because it's a larger channel, but you would be able to have less of them. But basically, long story short, on the 5G frequency, you can have more channels than the 2.4 and therefore avoid congestion much more effectively. Okay, so again, you have higher data rates. Theoretical speed maximum is 1300 megabits per second or 1.3 gigabits per second, but typically realistic 100 to 300 megabits per second. Okay, so just know it's faster than 2.4 essentially. In terms of compatibility, not all devices are compatible, but these days a lot of devices are going to be 5G compatible. We are in the age of the future, so we are getting there. So overall, the pros, you've got higher data rates and faster speeds, less interference from other devices like baby monitors and microwaves, and you've got more channels to choose from that are non-overlapping, so you can avoid congestion a bit more effectively. But you do have a shorter range and less ability to penetrate obstacles. And further, some older devices may not be supported. So if you've got really old devices that you need to be in use, consider that when you're making your choice about the frequency. And finally, guys, we're going to be moving on to the 6 gigahertz, which is basically everything we said before. It takes all of that and everything from the 5 gigahertz frequency, and it just doubles both the pros and the cons, essentially. Not necessarily doubles, but it you know what I mean. It increases it. So as we said, it has the range It's still effective for most indoor environments, right? But nowhere near as good as 2.4. Interference, it does have even more of a capability to avoid interference because you've got less devices operating it. It's quite a new one. A lot of people aren't using 6 gigahertz, and you also have way more channels, even more channels available. So you get that same thing we were talking about for 5 gigahertz, but for 6 gigahertz, you've got even more. So you can really amp it up on the channels and not worry too much about the interference or the network connectivity dropping out. So in terms of the speeds, you can get a maximum theoretical speed of about 9,600 megabits per second or 9.6 gigabits per second. Compare that to the 5G we were looking at, which is I think like 1,300 off the top of my head. It's a lot more, right? A lot more. But realistically, you're probably going to see 500 to 1,200, right? Realistically. There's a theoretical, and then there's the real. Okay, so again, compatibility, you're not necessarily going to have a lot of older devices compatible with 6G because it is quite a newer one. So you do have to take that into consideration as well when you're making your choice for your exam. So the pros, it has the highest data rates and fastest speeds, minimal interference from other devices. It has the most amount of non-overlapping channels, therefore most effectively avoiding congestion. And the cons are that it has the range is short again, and it's only compatible with newer devices that support Wi-Fi 6E. Okay, so your devices have to actually support Wi-Fi 6E in order to use that channel. And we're actually going to have a look at what that means, the different Wi-Fi standards in this exact same objective. So I'll keep powering through and we'll move on to this table, which is basically a visual representation of everything we just talked about. Okay, so pause and have a read if you want to, but generally speaking, that's what you're going to need to know for your exam. You're going to need to consider this information and make a decision based on the scenario that's presented to you. They might say this person has this particular network set up. You need to recommend a frequency band for this individual to use with their Wi-Fi to give them what they want. Okay, so you'll need to be able to use all of this to make a decision based on that. Now, we're going to talk more specifically on the concept of channels and what that means. So we already talked about the frequency bands. We just looked at 2.4 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz, and 6 gigahertz, how some have more channels than others. Right, we looked at this concept already kind of as we talked about the last one, so I won't drill on about it too much, but long story short, what you need to know for this particular dot point of your exam objective is you can choose to have these channels a wide variety of widths. We're going to talk about the specific widths in a second that you need to know about. You can choose to have it, right, like say this long or this long or this long. The bigger the channel, the higher the rate of data transfer is going to be. But also, generally speaking, the bigger the channel, the more risk of interference you're going to get because you're more likely to run into someone. It's kind of like if you're walking down the street and you've got your hands by your side, you might look a little shy and nervous. Maybe people won't want to talk to you too much, but you're not very likely to run into people. But if you're walking down the street and you're like, you've got your arms out wide and you're trying to look really confident, that's my attempt to draw muscles. I don't know, right? Oh, great. You look confident. You look muscly, but you're probably going to bump into someone. You might get into a fight, right? So that's the same kind of consideration you want to make here, okay? In terms of channels, you can have them a wide variety of widths, but you need to consider your toss-up between speed and congestion, essentially, okay? So again, you've got that idea of interference. You want to try to not interfere. So 2.4 gigahertz, you'll have interference from baby monitors, microwaves, etc. That's something to consider. Your channel width is something you need to consider. We'll talk about these in the next one, but you can see them there as well. You'll need to consider your regulatory compliance. Your particular area will have regulations regarding the channels that you can use, the width, things to that effect. So you'll need to be familiar. You don't need any specifics in terms of the exam. You just need to know that your area may have regulations that you do need to follow. You need to know the channels, benefits and cons for each frequency band. We talked about that before. Some have more, some have less. Okay. And you also need to know, based on what you want to do, how wide of a channel should you really have? How wide should you how wide should your channel be, depending on what you want to do. So if you want to do gaming, you'll probably need a wider channel to have more data throughput, to more high rates of data transfer. Okay, but if you're just browsing, probably not. If you're just doing internet browsing or emails. Okay, we'll get more into the specific channel widths in a second. You need to know about 4 specific ones. That's what I'm trying to say. Regulations, I just said, like before, you do need to know that your specific area will likely have specific regulations. It will depend on area. You just need to know for your exam that different areas have different regulations, and you need to follow those regulations, okay? That way everyone stays happy. If you follow the regulations, you're a good boy, okay? You're doing the right thing. So that's pretty much it. Channel selection, right? This is where, you know, what is going to decide what kind of channel you select. So channel selection involves choosing the best channel within a frequency band to minimize interference, as we talked about, and optimize performance. Those are the 2 big things you're going for, right? You're trying to minimize interference and optimize performance. So some factors might be the number of overlapping channels. As we said, 2.4 has less channels that you can use at the same time without overlapping, okay? Whereas 5 has more channels you can use, 6 gigahertz has more channels you can use, all right? The more Wi-Fi networks around, the better off you are using a smaller channel width, because the less likely you are to run into someone, all right? So we'll get into some specifics here with the widths. So you need to know about 4 specific widths for your exam. Basically, you can set a channel to be 20 megahertz wide, 40 megahertz wide, 80 megahertz wide, or 160 megahertz wide for your exam. They've specifically listed in the exam objectives. These are the 4 you need to know about. Okay, so we need to know basically that there's going to be a toss-up between speed and likelihood of interference. So if you are going to choose the 20 megahertz, you know, you're going to be a bit skinnier, so you're less likely to have interference, right? If you've got someone next to you, you're less likely to run into them. 40 megahertz, you're going to be a bit wider, so you can have a higher rate of data transfer, but you're getting a little bit close to that person next to you, you're more likely to run into them. 80 megahertz, it's going to double the 40, so you might end up running into somebody, at which point, you know, you're going to have some interference there. And 160, you know, if you really, really need that high rate of data transfer, then 160 would be something you want to do, but you just got to be aware that there is a higher risk of congestion because you're taking up so much more space. There's a higher risk that you might run into somebody. So the key thing is the skinnier, the lower the channel, the less likelihood of running into another one and having network issues. The higher the channel, the more data, the more data you're going to be able to transfer faster, more quickly, more efficiently. So if you're doing really high demanding tasks, you'll probably want a wider channel width, but you just got to be wary of that risk of interference. That's the main thing that you need to know for your exam, and you're going to have to be able to toss that up based on the scenario they give you. You might have to choose a channel width that's appropriate for what they've said. So, you know, if they say, hey, look, we're in a really busy retail store, we've got shops all over the place, these shops have routers in there, and everyone's got a Wi-Fi going on. I'm trying to avoid interference. I'm trying to avoid network congestion. What should I use? In that case, you probably want to use a channel width that's 20 megahertz, because really, what are you going to be doing in there? People are going to be using the Wi-Fi for maybe Googling, general internet access. So you can afford to use a smaller channel width because you're not really trying to do anything particularly demanding, right? In that instance. However, if let's say you're in like you've rented a big warehouse, and within this warehouse you have a team of video editors, and these guys are all over here, all over the shop, video editing, and they're using video editing on the cloud, and they need to be uploading and downloading really high quality files all the time, and you've actually hired out, this office is yours because you have a lot of money. You absolutely could, in this case, go for one that is 160 megahertz, because you're going to have to be sorry, I said 2.4 gigahertz over here. I should have said 20 megahertz. That's my fault. So this one will be 20 megahertz wide channel. Sorry guys, that's what I meant. 20 megahertz wide channel. Whereas in this video editing scenario over here, you can be going with 160 megahertz because you don't have to worry so much about interference, and you have to use the internet for very high demanding rates of data transfer, right? If you're uploading and downloading very high quality, very large files all the time, you'll need as wide of a channel width as you can get. And if you don't have too many neighboring shops, right, you've actually hired this warehouse out. So maybe there's another warehouse like over here somewhere, but there's a bit of distance. You don't have to worry too much about that interference, right? So that's the kind of stuff you'll have to toss up for your exam. Hopefully that made sense, guys. Hopefully that made sense. Now, we'll get into frequencies. You might be thinking, we already talked about frequencies, right? But here's what we mean when we say frequencies in terms of your exam. You have your main frequencies, right? You've got your 2.4, you've got your 5, and you've got your 6 gigahertz frequencies. However, you have frequencies within those frequencies. So basically what that means is, right, when we talked about these channels, when we talked about, you have this channel and this channel and this channel, really what this means is, like, you might have your 2.4 gigahertz frequency, 2.4 gigahertz, but within the channels are like a specific frequency and a specific frequency width, right? So for example, channel 1, 2.412. Now, if you're setting this up, you don't want to like log into your router and have to type in, okay, we're going to go to frequency, everyone go to frequency 2.412. No, it's just easier to say channel 1. So it's kind of like a thing where it's just makes it easier for us humans who don't talk in ones and zeros, right? So the channels just represent particular frequencies. In the same way, channel 6 would be frequency 2.437. So it is the 2.4 gigahertz frequency, but within that frequency, you've got a wide variety of specific frequencies, which are represented by the channels, okay? And however wide you set that frequency is like your channel width, right? So that's the megahertz. That makes it, so we were talking about the megahertz before. That this is just kind of an example of the channels represent the specific frequency, all right? It's just like it makes it easy for humans to understand, essentially. So we talked about how in the 2.4 gigahertz, your non-overlapping channels are 1, 6, and 11. And long story short, what you really need to know is 5 gigahertz band has much more non-overlapping channels or frequencies, and the 6 gigahertz band has even more non-overlapping channels or more frequency available, right? So as I said here, it's unlikely that you'll need to memorize the exact channels to use on 5 and 6 and the exact number. You just need to understand the concept that each one has more channels than the last. That's essentially it, to be honest with you. So hopefully everything we've covered so far makes a decent amount of sense. If not, please leave a comment. I'm happy to try to clarify. I'm just trying to keep on talking so that I don't have to go back and do too much editing, because I want to pump out this free video content for you guys as much as I can. And I want to make sure I can get all the high value stuff in here, okay? And then we looked at the bands. We have largely covered this as well. It's just the frequency bands is talking about those 3 main ones. So if you're asked about frequency bands, it's asking you about the 2.4 gigahertz frequency, 5 gigahertz frequency, and the 6 gigahertz frequency. And you need to know about all these pros and cons that we talked about. So we talked about how they have different ranges. Some penetrate more through walls than others. Some are better at interference, right? That's what you need to know. The pros and cons for each frequency band, or 2.4 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz, and 6 gigahertz. That's what we need to know about. Now, Bluetooth is the next topic that we're diving into. We have talked about Bluetooth already. We know that it creates a personal area network. We know that we connect our wireless headphones and keyboards, anything wireless that we're connected to our phone or our laptop, that's going to be through Bluetooth. Bluetooth uses the 2.4 gigahertz frequency, but it uses the industrial, scientific, and medical frequency band. So it's a very specific one, and it utilizes short wavelength UHF, or ultra high frequency radio waves. Bluetooth is designed for creating personal area networks, as we talked about already, and connecting various devices without the need for cables. So basically, guys, it operates on 2.4 gigahertz, but it's not as susceptible to interference as the other things that operate on 2.4 gigahertz, because it's using a very specific frequency band. Okay, it's using that very specific frequency band, so it's not as susceptible to interference. We know that it gives us wireless connectivity. We don't need wires if we're using Bluetooth. And here's the key: frequency hopping. Dial in on this one, guys. So it uses a technique called frequency hopping spread spectrum, or HSS to reduce interference and improve security. This essentially means what it does is it rapidly switches frequencies within the 2.4 gigahertz band. So it's switching all the time, which makes it more resilient to interference from other wireless devices. All right. Its range about 10 meters, or if you don't use a metric system, about 33 feet for most consumer devices. So you just within 10 meters essentially is what you need to know. We know that you need to pair it, and it also has a different variety of profiles. So you can have a headset profile or an advanced audio distribution profile if you want to stream high quality audio, or human interface device profile for connecting peripherals. It trails off there, but basically what you need to know here is it's wireless. It uses frequency hopping spread spectrum to quickly change within the 2.4 gigahertz band, and it uses, remember we talked about how it uses the specific band, the industrial, scientific, and medical frequency band within the 2.4 gigahertz frequency band. So it's just not that susceptible to interference, essentially, is what all that translates to. It's wireless, it does frequency hopping to avoid interference, and don't go more than 10 meters away from it. It creates a personal area network. Got all that, you should be sweet, guys. So the next thing is our Wi-Fi standards, guys, is our 802.11 standards. Now, this is on your exam objectives. These are called 802.11 standards. So if you ever see 802.11, that's essentially referring to Wi-Fi. These are wireless internet standards. I hate to be the one to tell you this, but we really need to know this table off by heart, essentially. What this is a variety of Wi-Fi standards. So our first one is 802.11. This is considered legacy. You've got 802.11a. That's one of the earlier types of Wi-Fi. Had a maximum data rate of 54 megabits per second, and it operated on the 5 gigahertz frequency band. Okay, don't worry about this for now. The next one is 802.11b. It's otherwise known as Wi-Fi 1. Operates at 11 megabits per second and uses the 2.4 gigahertz frequency band. The next one is 802.11g, otherwise known as Wi-Fi 3. Has a maximum data rate, of 54 megabits per second, and then 2.4 gigahertz band is what it uses. Okay. Now, look, guys, for the most part, you're more likely, I would say, for your exam to be tested on these ones, heading down here, than you are on these ones, simply because these ones are all a lot older. Okay. Why don't I use red for clarity? All of this, it's a lot older. I doubt you'll be asked super specific questions on that. If you're super pressed for time, I would highly recommend really focusing on these ones. However, I can't guarantee that you won't be asked questions on all of it. So it's good to know all of it, but if you have to choose because you're pressed for time, then focus on the green, but it's probably good to know the red as well. And the unfortunate reality is they've added a few new ones too. Okay, so the main differences are going to be between, you're going to need to know what the maximum data rate is. You're going to need to know what frequency it uses. You're going to need to know whether or not it uses something called multiple in, multiple out, which is essentially where they have a router, right? So let's say this is a router. For all of these ones, see all the ones in red here, if you had 3 people, the case was essentially the router could only communicate with one person at a time. So one person could send data back and forth at a time. However, with multiple in, multiple out, the router could still only communicate with one person at a time. But what they had now with multiple in, multiple out is they had more than one antenna, right? So that person could communicate across multiple streams to that router or access point, okay, making that data transfer way more effective and efficient. And then once we got 802.11 AC come into the equation, we have multiple user, multiple in, multiple out. So we added multiple user. Have a guess at what that means. Oops, why did I say MUMO? That should be MIMO. Sorry, guys. MIMO. What that basically means is you now have multiple streams for multiple users, which, as you can imagine, now multiple users can connect to the router using multiple streams at the same time, so it's going to be a lot faster, okay? And then when we get to 802.11be, which is the one all the way down the bottom, you can see it operates at 40 gigabits per second. It can operate on 2.4 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz, and 6 gigahertz frequency, and it uses enhanced multiple user, multiple in, multiple out technology, which essentially means you've got 16 streams, right? So that's turning this into like just superpower, right? You've got 16 streams for multiple users, okay? So I'm not going to read us through all of this. What I want you to do, if you have my learning guide, this is in the learning guide, and you've got those multiple choice questions that will really help you hone in on this. But basically for you guys at home, you need to know the name of the standard. So you need to know the name of the standard. You need to know the data rate, the maximum theoretical data rate, data rate of the standard. You need to know what frequencies it operates on. And you also need to know if it has multiple in, multiple out, or if it has multiple user, multiple in, multiple out. And for that last one, just know that it is enhanced and it has those 16 streams, okay? That's largely what you need to know. But if you don't have my learning guide, I just recommend taking a screenshot of this and basically knowing this table off by heart. I know it's a bit of a pain in the butt, guys, but you know, you got to do what you got to do sometimes. What I did when I was learning this, I would literally draw this table out like 4 or 5 times a day. And if I was going grocery shopping with my wife, then I would take the piece of paper with me, you know, as I'd put a can of chickpeas in the trolley, and then I would take my piece of paper. I'd try to remember it. Sorry, I'd try to recite it. 802.11a is at 54 megabits per second and I do that for everyone. And then I'd look to see if I got it right. Okay. And it's going to be one of those tedious ones. Okay. But you do need to know that, guys. You do need to know that. I can't guarantee that they won't test you on this stuff, but I'd say more than likely, like I said, they'll test you on the green just because they're more modern. A lot of this stuff is more legacy now, really, but I can't guarantee. So that's what I'm going to say. NFC, we've talked about what NFC is. We know that it is for short range communication. Okay, we know that we haven't specifically talked about the frequency. I don't think you'll need to know it, but you've got the frequency there anyway. You could benefit from knowing that. Should I do a rehash on it? Screw it. I'll do a rehash on it. So remember, NFC is if you've got your phone or your bank card and you just tap it to pay, essentially, right? It is very short range data transfers. So you are tapping a device against another device for a short range data transfer. You can use that to gain access to a building. You can use that to pay money. You can use it to transfer any kind of data. If you're just tapping in a very short range, then that's going to be NFC, okay? Some uses, like I said, actually we'll go, yeah, so you can have passive mode. Sorry guys, a bit all over the place today. You can have passive mode. Now in this mode, this is generally where you have one device that is not powered, but the radio waves from the other NFC device enable data exchange. So that's where you have your device, it is asleep, and let's say that's your card, for example, the NFC chip in your bank card, but when you hold it up against the card reader, that emits a signal which wakes your NFC chip up. That then says, oh, I'm awake, I'll send the data, and then once that data is sent, you go away and it goes back to sleep again. All right, that's kind of how that works in passive mode. That's passive. In active mode, both devices are generating their own power, their own electromagnetic fields. All right, that is less common, I'd say. So that's really what you need to know. You just need to know what it is. You really just need to be able to identify it in practice, okay? The next one is RFID, or radio frequency identification. This also uses radio waves, but it's for a different purpose and it can go longer distances, okay? So long story short, before I read through all this for you, RFID is for longer distances, still uses radio waves, and it's for largely for tracking inventory is one of the primary purposes for this. But we'll have a look through, okay? So it is a wireless communication technology used for identifying and tracking objects using radio waves. So warehousing, keeping track of where inventory is, things to that effect. So you have a tag that's usually attached to an object, and you'd have a reader which detects the tag's presence and it reads the stored data. RFID is widely used in inventory management, as we discussed, supply chain logistics, access control, and various other applications. Same thing between active and passive, okay? You can have an active tag that has its own power source, and you can have a passive tag that do not have their own power source and rely on the energy from the reader to generate. But generally, they'll both have their own power source. Not all the time, but you will find that. Now, the RFID reader is just what you're scanning that tag with, okay? It's basically, again, similar concept to NFC, but it's a longer distance, and they largely use it for keeping track of inventory, okay? We don't need all that. A brief description of how it works. The RFID reader emits a radio signal which powers up a passive RFID tag within its range. Active tags can use their own power source. The RFID tag transmits its unique identifier and any other stored data back to the reader. So that might be like its inventory number, something to that effect. And then data processing takes place where the RFID reader processes the received data and forwards it to a central database. So that would update the database. Hey, I just scanned this piece of inventory. That's at this facility here, at this location. Can you put that in the system so we now know where this object is? Okay, things to that effect. So again, used for inventory management, access control as well. You can get RFID tags or key fobs that are used to access buildings too. Supply chain logistics, like what I was just talking about there. You can track your assets. You can do it in healthcare, libraries, and archives. Generally, if you're tracking something, tracking the location, you're going to be using RFID, right? So, little tag, looks like that. Used in supply chain logistics, right? Big warehouse, be using RFID tags. You're tracking these things, RFID tags. He's using an RFID reader to scan the RFID there. Okay, well, in this example anyway. Okay, so that's what you'd use RFID for. Hopefully that makes sense, guys. We're going to go ahead and get into some practice-based questions. But before we do, long story short, for all of this stuff that we covered, right, for all this stuff we were just covering, what you'll need to be able to do, essentially, is you'll need to be able to have a look at a scenario and say, okay, based on what's happening in this scenario, here is the technology that's being used. So what that means is you might have to choose between 2.4 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz or 6 gigahertz. You might say, okay, based on your scenario, which is you want to be able to go really far distances through a lot of walls and you want to avoid interference, you'll need to use either this, or this frequency, right? Alternatively, you may need to say, okay, you want a wireless internet connection. You want a speed of 54 megabits per second, and you want to use this frequency. Based on that, you should use standard 802.11 and then either A, B, G, N, AC, AX, or BE, okay? You'd want to be able to make that judgment, all right? So that's a lot of information to take in, I know, but this is probably one of the most heavy-duty technical detail ones that you'll have for your exam. And additionally, you'll need to be able to locate NFC in a scenario or RFID based on the scenario that's been given to you. You need to be able to say, oh, that's NFC, or oh, that's RFID. They're tracking inventory management, so that's clearly RFID. Oh, they're making a quick payment at a service station. That's NFC, or near field communication. All right. That's what you're going to need to do. Now, let's get into our practice questions. We'll read through them and we'll see how much you learn. A quick flag, these questions don't cover everything for this exam objective. I think in my learning guide, I've got like 25 or something. I could not. I'd lose my voice if I read all those to you. So this is just some. Don't take this as everything you need to know in the questions. This is just a quick quiz to see how you're going. Okay. Now, the first question reads, A facility with thick walls, long corridors, and numerous physical obstructions needs improved wireless coverage. The ideal frequency in this environment would provide an extended range and better penetration through walls, even though it is typically more susceptible to interference from household devices like microwaves and cordless phones. A. 2.4 gigahertz. B. 5 gigahertz. C. 6 gigahertz. Or D. None of the above. Your answer coming in 3, 2, 1. Pause the video if you need more time. It is 2.4 gigahertz. So again, they specified they want it to be able to go through walls, and they even specified they want it to go long distance through walls, even though it's more susceptible to interference. Pause and have a read of the incorrect options if you want there. I try to give detailed explanations of all of that and why they're right, why they're wrong, but hopefully we got that. Let's have a look at the next one. Question 6, in this case, reads, a network technician is setting up a wireless network that uses the 2.4 gigahertz band in an area with many overlapping networks. To minimize interference and avoid overlapping channels, the technician decided to select non-overlapping channels for optimal performance. Which set of channels should be chosen to minimize overlapping on a 2.4 gigahertz network? A. Channels 1, 6, and 11. B. Channels 1, 5, and 9. C. Channels 2, 7, and 12. Or D. Channels 3, 6, and 10. Pause the video if you need more time. I'm going to move on, guys. Pause the video. 3, 2, 1. Here we go. The answer is A. Channels 1, 6, and 11. Remember, guys, those are the non-overlapping channels on the 2.4 gigahertz frequency band, because any other channels being used 3 at the same time, you're going to get that interference. 2.4 gigahertz has the least amount of channels, and it's most susceptible to interference out of the 3. All right, going to move on to the next question. Let's see how we go. Next question reads, a network technician is installing Wi-Fi in a densely populated office building where many nearby networks and devices cause considerable interference. In order to reduce the effects of congestion and interference, the technician opts for a channel width that significantly sacrifices data rate in favor of improved reliability in this challenging environment. Which channel width did the technician most likely choose? A. 20 megahertz, B. 40 megahertz, C. 80 megahertz, or D. 160 megahertz. Pause the video if you need more time. I'm going to move on to the answer. It is A. 20 megahertz. So it did say that it was densely populated and that it was having considerable interference from nearby networks, and they wanted to significantly sacrifice performance in favor of less congestion. So 20 megahertz would have been the one to go with there. That's the most you can possibly, that's as skinny as you can go, really. It's going to have less data rate, but it's going to be way less likely to experience overlapping with other channels. Okay, so that was the answer there. Again, for these ones, tossing up the channel widths, you're just going to have to toss up the speed and performance you need based on the requirements you were given and the level of congestion that you're willing to tolerate. All right, and the question will generally give you that information to make that decision. Okay, next question reads, a multimedia studio is setting up a high-performance wireless network dedicated to 4K and 8K streaming and virtual reality applications. The studio is located in an area with minimal interference, and the primary goal is to maximize data throughput. Which channel width did the engineer most likely choose? A. 20 megahertz, B. 40 megahertz, C. 80 megahertz, or D. 160 megahertz. Your answer coming in 3, 2, 1. Pause the video if you need more time. It is D, 160 megahertz. So guys, they wanted to maximize that data throughput. They were doing a lot of really high intensity stuff, 4K, 8K streaming. The wider the channel, the more data you're going to be able to put through at the one time. So 160 megahertz was the one for that. Again, tossing up performance versus congestion, and the requirements made it clear we wanted to maximize performance, and in which case we want the widest channel selection possible. Next question reads, A user pairs wireless earbuds with their smartphone to listen to music. The device communicates wirelessly over a short distance, approximately 10 meters, without the need for cables. The connection utilizes a technique that rapidly switches frequencies within a specific ISM band to reduce interference and enhance security. Which wireless communication technology is being described in this scenario? A. Wi-Fi, B. Bluetooth, C. Infrared, or D. NFC? 3, 2, 1. Pause the video if you need more time. Here we go. It's Bluetooth, guys. That was Bluetooth. Hopefully we could identify that. You can pause and read the other options if you need to, but that one was Bluetooth. All right, next question reads, a new wearable health monitor communicates wirelessly with a smartphone using a method designed to minimize interference. The device rapidly switches its transmission among multiple channels within the 2.4 GHz band to avoid potential disruptions and enhance connection security. Which technique is being employed by this device? A. Frequency hopping spread spectrum. B. Direct sequence spread spectrum. C. Orthogonal frequency division multiplexing. Or D. Time division multiple access. Yikes. Pause the video if you need more time. 3, 2, 1. Answer's coming up. Answer is A. Frequency hopping spread spectrum. That is what Bluetooth does, guys. That's what we talked about in this exam objective. We did go over that, how it quickly switches within the 2.4 gigahertz band, okay, to be less susceptible to interference. So hopefully we got that one. If not, that's okay. Now we know where we need to focus a bit more. Next question, guys. I'm giving you a lot of questions in this one, all right? Hopefully we didn't see the answer. Pretend you didn't if you did. Okay. Maybe I got to move this up, actually. Here we go. The next one reads, a mid-sized office installs a new wireless router that operates solely on the 5 GHz band. It makes use of orthogonal frequency division multiplexing to achieve data rates of up to 54 megabits per second. Which 802.11 standard is being described? A. 802.11a, B. 802.11b, C. 802.11g, D. 802.11n, E. 802.11ac, F. 802.11ax. Pause the video if you need more time. You can see I gave you heaps of options there, guys, because I want you to really be able to distinguish between these, okay? 3, 2, 1. Pause the video if you need more time. Oh, I gotta enlarge that. I've scrolled in as much as I can scroll in. Yikes. Okay. The answer is 802.11a. Okay. The router operates solely on the 5 gigahertz band, guys. Largely, this is all going to come down to just knowing the stats of this. I'm not going to talk through each and every one. Pause to read if you want, but it's just going to come down to knowing the stats. All right. So that one was 802.11a. The next question reads, a business is deploying a new high-performance wireless network to support its ever-growing data needs. The new router operates across the 3 frequency bands, the 2.4 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz, and 6 gigahertz, and advertises a peak data rate of up to 40 gigabits per second. It also incorporates enhanced multi-user MIMO technology, supporting up to 16 spatial streams, and utilizes a 320 megahertz channel bandwidth to maximize performance even in a densely populated environment. Which 802.11 standard is being described? A. 802.11a, B. 802.11be, C. 802.11ax, or D. 802.11ac. Holy smokes, right? 3 seconds, then I'm moving on. Pause the video if you need more time. 3, 2, 1. It was B, 802.11be. All right. So just again, guys, it's come down to knowing the standard, but BE is the one that does all of that the question required. Just go back, have a look through the table if you didn't get that. Pause and read here, but we just got to know those standards, right? That's pretty much what it comes down to. All right. Which of the following is not a use case for NFC technology? A. Contactless payments using mobile wallets. B. Secure access control with smart cards and badges. C. Quick pairing of Bluetooth devices by tapping them together. Or D. Long-range data transfer for establishing home network connectivity. Pause the video if you need more time. Your answer coming in 3, 2, 1. It is D, long range data transfer. So NFC, close range, guys. Anything long range, you cannot do with NFC. It is only for close range data transfer. Really important to understand that one. All right, next question is, oh, sorry guys, if you did want to have a better look at that, pause the video, have a read, but I'm going to move on. Can't talk through everything here. The next question reads, a company implements a system to manage its inventory by attaching small tags to each product. These tags contain a unique identifier that are designed to communicate with dedicated readers using radio waves. Some tags are passive, relying on energy from the reader for activation with a range of up to about 10 meters, while others are active with their own power source that allows them to be read from distances up to 100 meters. This system is widely used in supply chain logistics, access control, and asset tracking. Which technology is being described? A. NFC, B. RFID, C. Wi-Fi, or D. Bluetooth? 3 seconds, then I'll give you your answer. 3, 2, 1. Here you go. It is RFID. Remember, guys, RFID is frequently used in not data tracking, in inventory tracking, inventory management, supply chain logistics. All right. NFC is only for close contact. Wi-Fi is an 802.11 wireless internet standard. That's what the standards are. And then Bluetooth creates a personal area network, headphones, wireless mouse, wireless keyboards, things like that. All right. Finally, guys, I think I can stop talking because I'm running out of my voice here. Look, if you've enjoyed this, guys, this has all come from my learning guide, from my website. You can go grab my free practice exam in the link in the description and in the pinned comment below. I've got a free practice exam for you. You've got performance-based questions you can do, such as that one there, where you have to configure a RAID thing, and you've got multiple choice questions. Okay, you got everything you need. Alternatively, you can head over to journeytocyber.com/1201, or just click the link in the description or my pinned comment to grab my learning guide and my ultimate learning guide, right? So basically, guys, here I give you complete learning guide. I break everything down by the exam objectives, and I give you notes. I give you multiple choice questions. Everything in here has come from that learning guide, except all the photos and stuff like that. All right. I give you 3 full-length randomized practice questions as well, and a spreadsheet to track your results. All right. So it's really, really good. I can't recommend it enough. I truly think it's the best value for money, particularly on the 1201. There's not much out there for the 1201 at the moment. All right. And my previous resources have helped people pass before, and this one that I've made for the 1201 is so much better than everything else I've made in the past. I've really put it all on steroids. So people like my previous stuff, you're going to love this one. Trust me. All right. So basically it looks like this. You've got it all broken down by exam objective. You've got notes, questions, answers for all of that. And you also have your PBQs at the very bottom too. And you can see the level that I've broken it down to. You've got the primary exam objective, and then the dot points, and then the dot points within the dot points. It's all broken down, super organized for you, ready to go. Okay. So yeah, we've got multiple choice questions, as I said, detailed answers in that learning guide, performance-based questions. Oh my gosh. So I also give you a video on how to 10 times your learning with free AI tools. All right. So I'll show you how to use 2 really cool AI tools on how to focus in on your study for those topics you just can't seem to understand. So if you're stuck on something, then this video will probably help you out as well. That's just, consider that a free little bonus in that course, really, because the learning guide is already good enough as it is. I also tell you exactly how to use multiple choice questions to study. All right, I give you a specific formula to follow, which most people don't do. Most people really miss out on their opportunity to learn and get knowledge from studying with multiple choice questions. So I really show you a specific technique on how to do that. Okay. That being said, guys, that's pretty much it. So you can head over to journeytocyber.com if you want to grab that. Otherwise, hey, I'll see you in the next video. You keep studying, you're going to smash it. Trust me, you're doing a great job. And if you keep going like you're going, you're going to do it. All right. You don't need my learning guide to pass. It'll just like help speed things up a little bit, but you can do it all completely free. I'm going to make this whole course completely free. We'll get all good in the hood. I'm going to get you through it. All right. See you guys in the next one. Bye.